friends, welcome back. 3:35 at 4. I bet you've heard about the movie 1917. It's getting a lot of buzz for its wins at the Golden Globes for Best Picture and Best Director.
So our movie critic got to sit down and chat with the cast and crew of this amazing war epic. Now here to tell us about it from the website Paul's Trip to the Movies. You know him, you love him. Paul McGuire Grimes is back with us today.
Hello, hi.
Okay, Paulie, so we'll get to some of those conversations in a minute, but for people who are just hearing the number 1917, what does this mean in terms of a movie?
So it's World War I. It's a World War I epic about two soldiers that have to cross enemy lines to deliver this message to their squadron so that they don't fall into a trap.
Oh.
It's so intense, so stressful. It's directed by Sam Mendes, who did movies like American Beauty, Skyfall, Jarhead. He's a phenomenal director. He just won Best Director, too, at the Golden Globes.
Yeah, speaking of which, is how fun that Paul actually got the chance to sit down and chat with the director of that to find out about his own family who fought in World War I. Check it out.
You dedicate the movie to your grandfather. What did you learn about him when he was telling you these stories of his days fighting in World War I?
Well, the first thing I learned about him was how lucky he was to be alive. I think that so many of the stories are about, you know, just the thin line between life and death and how many of his friends died alongside him. Yeah. And one story he told in particular was a story about crossing no man's land with a message at dusk. And in that image of that tiny man in that vast panorama, you know, with the dead all around him, that really stayed with me. And I thought, well, what if that one man were to just keep going with that message? And that was the basis of this movie.
Wow, that's really interesting.
This seems like one of these, I don't know, is it safe to describe this as not your typical war movie based on some of the choices that they made artistically?
Yeah, so they made it look as if it's one long continuous take, kind of like Birdman. That's a great question.
And Birdman was fascinating in that regard.
It is so I felt like I was the third man in this mission because the camera's at their eye level, so you're in the trenches with them, and then you'd never know what's going to explode above you. Wow. There's a plane going above you. It was stunning, and so you don't know like when they've shot
sort of a video game audience a little bit.
I mean, nowadays how video games are like that. But even if you are a lover of history, World War I didn't know a lot about World War I, so this movie was so educational for me as well. And I think talking to Sam, it's a reminder that we need to talk to our grandparents and our elders about what were the lives that they led, especially when you're so far removed from that life.
That's so true. So you also sat down with Dean Charles Chapman, who plays one of the soldiers who is tasked with going behind enemy lines. Let's look at that.
Did you guys go through any military boot camp at all to kind of learn what it would be like to be a veteran and a soldier?
Yeah, we did. We did a lot of training. We rehearsed for 6 months before we made this film, and them 6 months of rehearsals sort of involved, you know, training with a military advisor called Paul Biddis, who actually served in the British military. And we do a lot of military drills and, you know, learning how to shoot with the rifles with the armoury team. But really, a lot of it was to make it look like second nature. Right. Like we've been soldiers, not, you know, the whole thing of it was, you know, on the day of filming, we had so much to do and so much to think about. We didn't want to be worrying about how to reload the rifle. Yeah. Very fingers and thumbs.
We'll get your fuller review in a second, Paul, but as for the performance of these guys, let me just ask this very bluntly. Right. Is the average person supposed to be familiar with these guys? They seem like relative newcomers.
Great point. They are kind of relatively newcomers. You may recognize them, but that's kind of the point. It's great when you don't know who these actors are, because then you're not thinking about past performances, past films. You can just know them as these characters and be on the journey with them.
Okay. I want to hear this. Paul got to sit down with the movie's screenwriter as well to find out what is it like scripting a movie that, frankly, has very little dialogue.
A lot of this movie, there's no dialogue in it.
Yeah.
As a screenwriter, that must be a challenge then to have to
It is a challenge, but also, I mean, part of my job as a writer is to write the description of what you're seeing on screen. And so even though there's not dialogue, there's still, you know, pages and pages of text that describe them moving across no man's land, even though there's maybe 7 words said in no man's land. That's probably like a 5-page sequence. More so in this film than ever before, because this film would be told so visually. So that made me really, well, Sam and I had to up our game in how we would tell that on the page.
Okay, I also love everyone's accents.
It was just, I could have talked to all of them for hours.
Forever. Okay, now we need to know from you, is this movie good?
It's stunning. You have to go see this movie in a theater. For the way that we've been talking about it, you can't get that feeling when you're just at home streaming it on like a 60-inch TV. You need to be so immersed in the theater to understand what these soldiers and these veterans went through, and you're right there with them. It blew my mind, how they shot it, the emotional impact that I went through, knowing I could never do this, and then thinking about who in my life made those types of sacrifices as well.
Ticket stubs.
4.5 out of 5. It's one of the best
Wow.
of the years. There's a lot more of these conversations on my YouTube channel. We got to talk about why history matters, more about the shooting this movie. It was fantastic.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks for
This is
having
really
me.
Great.
You can visit Paul's website. It's paulstriptothemovies.com for more movie reviews. You can also listen to him on the Colleen and Bradley Show on My Talk 107.1 every Friday. Or, as you mentioned, check out his YouTube channel. It's also called Paul's Trip to the Movies.